Her, ballerina and Pilates instructor. Toned body, disciplined, proud posture. Him, introverted programmer, skinny, wears glasses, works from home. He lived on the second floor of an old building in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. The street was quiet, tree-lined, with minimalist cafes on the corner and vintage bike shops sharing space with old laundromats. It was the kind of neighborhood where freelancers, artists, and lonely programmers coexisted with elderly women who had lived there since the 60s. His name was Ethan, a software developer for a cybersecurity startup based in Austin. He had been working remotely since before the pandemic. His apartment was dark, quiet, and functional. 2 monitors, a light wood desk, books stacked on the floor, and a couch he often fell asleep on without realizing. Skinny, slouched, with glasses always slightly crooked on his nose, Ethan was the kind of guy who went unnoticed anywhere, except by those who paid attention. His brown hair was almost always messy, and his gaze, though hidden behind lenses, revealed a restless mind, full of worlds he rarely put into words. He had fine hands, long fingers of someone who types more than he lives, and a soft, polite, almost hesitant voice. Above him lived Ava, a classical ballerina, Pilates teacher at a boutique studio in Manhattan. Her body looked sculpted by discipline. Open shoulders, straight back, precise walk. She had a visible strength, but never flaunted, as if every movement carried intention and control. Her dark brown, almost black hair was always tied in a perfect bun, and her eyes, firm, dark, analytical, seemed capable of piercing through any hesitation. She had defined arms, upright posture, and a voice that didn't need volume to be heard. Every morning, before 7, the sound of classical music seeped through Ethan's ceiling. Chopin, Debussy, Vivaldi. He knew it wasn't by accident. That was part of a ritual. They sometimes crossed paths in the building hallway or at the door of the shared laundry room. Ethan always with a delivery bag in hand, she holding a yoga mat or the bag with her ballet slippers. Ava rarely smiled, but when she did, it was brief and precise, like someone who doesn't waste energy. He noticed her, always, since day one. And even though they had never exchanged more than a murmured, "Hi," there was something about her presence that lingered, that pushed his thoughts out of the logic of code. Ava was real, present, unreachable, at least until now. The encounter happened on a gray Saturday, one of those when the wind feels like it's blowing straight from the Hudson. Ethan had gone downstairs to pick up a package at the front desk, a new mechanical keyboard he had been waiting for days. He was wearing sweatpants and slippers, hair tangled as always, lost in his own world. But as he entered the building's narrow lobby, he almost ran into her. Ava was standing in front of the wall of mailboxes, holding a thick envelope, wearing a long black coat over workout clothes. Her high bun was flawless, her skin lightly sweaty, as if she had just returned from an intense class. She turned, and their eyes met. "Watch your step," she said, without smiling, pointing with her chin at a box that had fallen in the way. Her voice was low, firm, the kind that doesn't ask, only informs. Ethan muttered an automatic sorry, but stood still for a second. It wasn't just her physical presence, the posture, the way she occupied space. It was the ease with which she spoke, as if that building belonged to her, as if he were a visitor there. As he bent down to pick up his own package, it slipped from his hands. Quick, Ava bent down too and caught it before it hit the floor. "Ballerina reflexes," she remarked, raising one eyebrow slightly. handing the package back to him. This time, there was a trace of a smile on her lips. Ethan gave a nervous laugh. For the first time, not because of what she said, but because of what he felt. A kind of quiet, almost comfortable embarrassment. She was beautiful, but that wasn't it. It was the control, the calm, the certainty. As she walked up the stairs with firm steps, without looking back, he stood still for a moment, looking at the closed door. He felt as if something had shifted inside him. It wasn't love, not yet. It was curiosity, with a taste of surrender. After the episode in the lobby, Ethan started to notice Ava more often. Or maybe he had just become more aware of how often he already noticed her. She would come down the stairs around 6:40 in the morning, always with a small metal bottle in hand and a little black backpack on her back. He, waking up late, would end up hearing her light footsteps above the ceiling while still trying to gather the courage to get out of bed. One day, an email from the building management notified that the main washing machine in the shared laundry room was broken. And that's how the two of them ended up in the basement at the same time, waiting for the only two remaining dryers. Ethan was folding his t-shirts with almost childlike precision when she arrived. Do you always fold like that? Out of necessity or just style? Ava asked, leaning her hip against the cement counter. He chuckled, awkward. I don't know. I think it's a mix of OCD and having nothing else to do. She didn't reply, just watched as he kept folding, and only then took her own clothes out of the dryer. Workout leggings, sports bras, neatly folded towels. She was as organized as he was, but without looking like she was trying. You work from home, right? She asked, as she placed the clothes into her canvas bag. Yeah, programmer. And you, ballerina, right? I mean, I hear the music. Not that I'm listening in, just it's easy to notice. She looked at him for a moment, almost as if evaluating the sincerity in his words, then nodded. I am. I also teach Pilates. Nearby. It was their first full conversation. Small, but enough to leave something in the air. The following week, she found him again, this time sitting on the building's front steps, laptop on his lap, and a frustrated expression. The Wi-Fi was down. Ava stopped beside him, adjusted her headphones around her neck, and asked, Do you need internet? If you want to come up, my router works fine. Ethan hesitated, surprised. She noticed. The door will be open. Just come in. 3rd floor, number 5. There was no time for him to say yes or no. She just walked in, with that same calm certainty that seemed to guide her in everything. Ethan went up 10 minutes later, laptop in hand and heart racing, not knowing exactly what to expect. But he was welcomed with a cup of ginger tea, the sound of a cello in the background, and the faint scent of eucalyptus from the diffuser in the room. They didn't talk much that day, but he stayed there, in the corner of the couch, working in silence, and she, sitting on the rug, stretching her legs with almost inhuman flexibility, didn't seem to mind his presence. From then on, the encounters began to happen. No formal invite, no message. Just a half-open door on the 3rd floor and the constant possibility that he might come up. It was on a rainy, muggy Wednesday night that Ethan realized, without words, that something inside him had already given in. He was at Ava's apartment again. It was almost routine now. He knocked with his fingers. She simply said, Come in, and he did. There was never formality, no promises, but he knew she waited for him, the same way he needed to be there. That night, Ava was preparing a simple dinner: grilled salmon, steamed vegetables, and lemon rice that smelled like a warm hug. She cooked barefoot, hair loosely tied, and wore an oversized t-shirt that said, "Discipline is freedom." Ethan tried to help, but she just pointed her chin toward the counter chair. "Tonight you just sit. I'll take care of it." And he sat. He obeyed, without resistance. He felt strange about it, but not uncomfortable. It was like switching off the alert mode, the one he'd kept on since forever, since he was a kid. With her, that mode felt useless. During dinner, she talked about a student who had improved her posture in 3 weeks. He listened, but also observed the way Ava cut the vegetables with precision, how she chewed slowly, how she paused before replying. Everything about her was rhythm. And he, who had always lived in the chaos of his own mind, was starting to like this silent choreography. After the meal, she pulled a mat to the center of the room and called him. "Lie down here. Trust me." He obeyed again. She began stretching his arms, his shoulders, his spine. She corrected his posture with firm touches, guiding his body as if it were an extension of hers. He, eyes closed, felt vulnerable in a new way and accepted at the same time. It was there, between one stretch and another, that Ethan realized he wasn't losing control. He was choosing to give it up. And for the first time, it didn't feel like weakness. It felt like freedom. It was on a Sunday afternoon, early spring, when Ethan decided to invite her for coffee with a few college friends. A small reunion in Central Park, with people he hadn't seen in years. The invitation was almost shy, between a bite of sandwich and a sip of tea. Ava looked at him for a few seconds, weighing the invitation in silence, then replied with a short, "Okay," without hesitation. He was surprised. He hadn't expected her to accept so easily. And maybe that was what made him more nervous than he should have been. On the agreed day, Ethan arrived at the park a few minutes early with Ava. He wore dark jeans, a hastily ironed dress shirt, and sneakers he thought matched. Ava, on the other hand, wore elegant black pants, a gray tank top, and a long beige linen coat, her hair tied in a simple bun. She looked ready for any occasion, and, in a way, stood out too much in the group. His friends noticed. "Hey, Ethan. Didn't know you were dating Wonder Woman." One of them laughed. Another added, a bit unfiltered, "Seriously, man? How'd you pull that off?" Ava stayed silent, watching them as if measuring the room's temperature. Ethan, however, froze. He lowered his gaze, gave an awkward laugh, didn't know what to say, didn't stand up, just diverted the conversation with a silly comment about the weather. Later, back at the building, as they climbed the stairs, the silence between them was heavy. He knew. He knew he should have done something, said something, but he didn't. And it ate at him. When they reached her apartment door, he finally spoke. "Sorry, about earlier, for not saying anything." Ava looked at him, serious, but not cold, just firm. "You don't need to defend me, but you also can't allow me to be disrespected by your side." He said nothing, feeling the weight of every word. "You're not less for being with me, Ethan, and I'm not too much. We're different, and that's what makes it possible." She then stepped closer, adjusted his glasses with the tip of her fingers, and added, "But next time, lift your chin, look them in the eye. You don't need to fight, just don't run." There was a second of silence. Ethan nodded, swallowing hard, and for the first time, he didn't feel judged. He felt guided by someone who knew exactly where she stood and was willing to teach him. That night, he didn't want to leave. After the conversation on the stairs, Ava simply opened her apartment door without saying a word, and he walked in, silently, like someone accepting an invitation that had already been in the air. She went straight to the bedroom, took off her coat, and traded her shoes for thick socks. He stayed in the living room, standing, looking at her bookshelf as if he had never noticed the old photos, the books on anatomy and art, the plants growing freely. When she came back, she didn't say anything. She just leaned on the doorframe, arms crossed, watching him. He turned slowly, and at that moment, he knew, not through words, but by the way she looked at him, steady, attentive, with the same expression she would use when facing an imperfect movement in a Pilates class. Patient, but demanding. "Are you still going to ask for permission to exist?" she asked without irony. Just truth. Ethan tried to answer, but his throat went dry. All that came out was a faint, almost guilty smile. Ava took 2 steps toward him. Soft, measured. With her left hand, she touched the back of his neck. Not gently, but with control. Her hand was warm, steady. The other rose to his face and made him look into her eyes. "Stop running." Then she kissed him. It wasn't slow, nor rushed. It was right, as if that gesture had already happened 1,000 times in silence, and now was simply taking shape. He didn't have time to think, nor did he want to. He felt his back touch the wall, his body yielding to her touch, not from weakness, but from the desire to surrender. She led everything, the rhythm, the space, the pauses. And he, for the first time in his life, didn't need to think, control, anticipate. He was being guided, and that was exactly what set him free. When the kiss ended, Ava kept her forehead against his. They breathed together. "You don't need to be strong all the time, Ethan. Here, you can just feel." He didn't answer. He just closed his eyes and placed his hand on her waist, not to pull her, but to anchor himself. From that moment on, everything changed. Not because he gave in, but because he finally understood. There is strength in surrender. And there, with her, being guided was also a way of choosing. The bedroom light was low, amber-toned, filtered through a corner lamp that looked more like a candle than a bulb. The sound of the city dissolved outside, muffled by the closed windows. Inside, there was only the 2 of them, the space between them shrinking until it disappeared. Ava took him by the hand, without asking. There were no words. She simply guided him to the mattress, sat down first, and waited for him to understand. He understood. Ethan approached slowly, but it was she who laid him down. With her knees beside his body, she climbed up calmly, positioning herself above, her eyes fixed on his. Her hands were firm on his shoulders, as if claiming territory, but without rush, without anxiety. She knew exactly what she was doing, and he, in that instant, knew he had always wanted to be touched like that, with purpose. She took both his wrists and brought them above his head. A single gesture, a clean movement. No brute force, but full of control. With just one hand, she held his arms down against the mattress and smiled. A small smile, almost imperceptible, like someone revealing they had known from the very beginning that he would give in. "Shh," she said, seeing his breath quicken. "Feel." And he felt the warmth of her leg against the side of his body, the gentle weight on his chest, her eyes steady on his, as if they were dancing without music. Words ceased to exist. Only gestures remained. She led. The rhythm, the pause, the silence, everything came from her, and he simply let himself be carried. She leaned in, until her lips touched his neck, not kissing, just hovering, like someone marking territory through presence. Then she gently bit the softest part of his collarbone, and he closed his eyes, not from pain, but from surrender, from the shiver, from fearless yielding. "Are you here, Ethan?" she whispered, her mouth far too close to his skin. "Now, more than ever," he replied, almost voiceless. She placed both hands on his chest and lowered her gaze, like someone admiring a landscape already conquered, then looked back up, deep into his eyes, a look that said, "You were always mine. I was just waiting for you to realize." Ava didn't need permission, but the fact that he wanted to be guided was the greatest permission of all. And that night, Ethan discovered that the pleasure of surrendering to someone's strength isn't submission. It's trust. It's real surrender. And when she embraced him afterward, laying her body over his, her head resting on his shoulder, everything became still, silent, whole. And he, with his arms still under her weight, unmoving, thought, this is what it feels like to be chosen. Not as a conquest, but as destiny. She said nothing. She simply stood up, her knees still beside his body, and looked down at him, like someone analyzing a sculpture about to take form. The silence that followed had something electric in it. Ethan didn't dare move, not out of fear, nor hesitation, but out of respect for what was about to unfold. Ava leaned in slowly, as if in no hurry to arrive. Her lips hovered near his, close enough for him to feel the warmth of her breath, but far enough to ache. Then she pulled back, a step away, a simple gesture that said everything. "You come when I want you to." Ethan followed her with his eyes, as if even his neck were under her command. Ava didn't smile. She just ran her fingers along his chin and turned his face to the side, with a touch that felt like affection, but was command. Then, without warning, she bent down and lightly bit his shoulder, just enough to make him tense for a second. He let out a soft moan, surprised, and she only whispered, her mouth close to his ear, "I like that sound." She pinned his wrists again, above his head, and this time held them there with firmness. With the other arm, she leaned beside his face, staying close, very close, her whole body pressing into his, yet with total control over the distance. Her hips moved once, then stopped, just to feel the reaction, and Ethan reacted. He closed his eyes, bit his lip, gave in. Ava released his arms, only to hold them again in a different way, crossed, pinned against his chest, as if to say, "You're mine now." And he was, entirely. She teased him the entire time, brought her lips close, brushed the tip of her nose, then pulled away, pressed her thigh against his, whispered, "Relax," and let out a nearly inaudible laugh upon noticing how hard it was for him. The tension in Ethan was like a magnetic field, and she orbited it with delight. "Can you take it?" she asked, her gaze unwavering. He didn't answer, just nodded. "Then don't move," Ava said, and bit his lower lip gently before pulling her face away. In that moment, Ethan realized control hadn't been taken. He had offered it, completely, because the desire he felt now didn't come from initiative, but from permission. Permission to be dominated with care, with intelligence, with presence. She led him with her body, with her eyes, with the silence. And he, without noticing, had already been dancing to her rhythm since the very first touch. The room was still silent when Ava stood up, walking to the window without saying a word. The light from the street outlined her silhouette against the thin curtain, and for a moment, Ethan thought That moment had come to an end. But then she spoke, with her back turned. "I never let anyone sleep here." The sentence came out dry, straightforward, as if it were more a statement than a confession. Ethan didn't answer. He just propped himself up on his elbows, still on the mattress, watching. "It's not fear of others. It's mine." She turned slowly, crossing her arms as if she were cold, though the room was warm. Most people look at me and see strength or control, like it's natural, but they don't know that it was the only thing left after everything broke. She walked to the edge of the bed. I had to learn not to need, to manage on my own, to not expect care from anyone. And it worked. It worked so well that sometimes even I forget I miss it. Ethan looked at her as if every word was finding a perfect place inside him. "You seem so steady all the time," he murmured. "But now, I see that you hold more than you let fall." Ava smiled, finely, not the smile of someone who wins, but of someone who, for a moment, can rest. She sat beside him and leaned her head on his shoulder. "Tonight is the first time in a long time that I want someone to stay. Without fear, without guarding, just stay." And he stayed, not out of duty, nor out of excitement. He stayed because there, for the first time, he understood that strength could also mean this, allowing yourself to be a shelter. In the days that followed, everything changed, but without a fuss. Ava still woke up early, still trained with the same fierce discipline. But now, sometimes, she left the door unlocked before leaving, like a silent invitation. Ethan, in turn, started waking up earlier, without an alarm, not out of anxiety, but out of peace. He began to write better, to breathe better, as if her order had started tidying his mess. From the inside, sometimes he waited for her outside the studio, with a water bottle and an extra jacket. Sometimes she held his hand in the middle of the street, without looking to the sides. And when he asked, "Everything okay?" she answered, "Everything." But her look said, "You see me." They weren't a classic couple, and they didn't need to be. Their dance was different, and now, finally, it belonged to both. He grew up believing that to love was to protect. He built defenses, made plans, shaped life into predictable lines, all to make sure nothing slipped out of control. But Ava didn't ask for shelter. She was wind. She was rhythm. She was presence. She didn't save him from anything. She simply invited him to stop fighting. And on the day she held his wrists, looked into his eyes, and said, "Sit," Ethan understood. It wasn't about surrendering. It was about trusting. She was a storm. He, shelter. But when they looked at each other, they discovered that the shelter also wanted to dance in the rain. If you have an idea, a memory, or even a completely made-up story where she leads, cares, or simply changes everything, leave it in the comments. It can be a sentence, a scene, a name, fictional or real. It doesn't matter. What matters is the feeling. Who knows? Maybe the next dance begins with your words.